Welcome to the Red Letters Podcast. In this podcast, we explore topics that can be life-transforming while delivering a message of hope.
Well, actually, can I say something about my youngest? He plays the drums for a church, and they actually do background checks, even on the worship, on the people playing on the worship team. Anybody that steps into any ministry, they have to fill out a background check. They do a background check, and then they have to actually fill out a form that talks about themselves, describes themselves. And so before he can actually, and it's actually quite a few pages
Really? Okay.
that he had to do. But I was like tripping out on that. But yeah, there are like bigger churches that do that. They are very careful to and who they allow to step in, and especially with children. Like for example, he's a drummer for the youth worship team. So that was more an intensive background check with him because he's working with children and teenagers and stuff like that. So yes. They do that.
It's unfortunate because it's church. You would think like, oh, you know what? We're supposed to be open and we're supposed to be welcoming to everybody.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's so much going on right now that we need to be careful. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I'm just...
No, I agree. I think you have to be careful because I was in a church at one point and there was a certain gentleman there that was in the children's ministry, and lo and behold, I had invited a friend, and that friend came and actually knew that person, and they were a relative of a relative, or they were like a friend of a relative's, and found out that he had molested a family member, but yet he was in children's ministry. But once she told me that, that's when I brought it to their attention and said, hey, you might want to look into this. So,
no, I think they did the background check because he was working with kids.
yeah.
It wasn't because he was playing the drums. But even at the church we go to, when I joined the worship team, they gave me 3 months. They called it, I think, not a sabbatical, but they gave me 3 months. Anyone who joins, they're like, hey, for 3 months, you're going to participate in practice and stuff, but we're not going to put you up there yet. And that's more of
That's
like, let's
really good,
relationally get to know each other.
Yes,
We would meet in groups and we get to, relationship wise. But I noticed I felt closer to them. So then when I did actually serve, they were able to trust me.
Okay.
And it wasn't like, okay, is she gonna what is she gonna say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I wanted to share something because I was thinking, you were talking about ministry, right? And so I'm just sitting here listening to y'all. And then Mary, you were talking about how like whenever you notice something bugs you, usually it reflects yourself or it shows you something that maybe is internal. And so when you're saying that, I'm like, well, as people in serving in church and stuff, like we are a reflection of Jesus, right? So as we're serving, I believe the Lord desires to purify us in our serving. And so I was like, Lord, I was like, okay, and I'm just listening to you guys. And then he's like, well, when you're in ministry, you're first called to minister. And then I looked up what minister meant, and it means a person acting as the agent or instrument of another. And so a lot of people think, oh, ministers are like pastors and stuff. Yeah, that's maybe it could be a definition, whatever. But every person who serves in ministry is a minister first. Like they're signing up to be a minister. So not only are they portraying themselves to others, but now they're like taking on, hey, I'm serving for Jesus. So whatever I do, it's not only my reputation, but now I'm putting the Lord, like, oh, this is the Lord too. And so I found that really like, oh.
That's really good.
So we're ministers in ministry.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that neat?
You should put that in.
And I think our church does a really good job of mentorship. I don't know, Tony, but I really think, I don't know. Do you guys think that? For me, when I started there, I felt, for me, it was really small when I started there. So my mentor was pastor. And I felt I always had guidance. And then for the women's ministry, it was pastora. So I always felt like there was guidance there. I didn't feel like I was thrown in there, and I never really felt forced to do anything or even pressured. Some of the things I volunteered for, I was like, oh, I should be doing this, and I wasn't any good at it, but I was still volunteering.
Were you playing the drums?
Yeah, and then I would like just fade away into the dark, and then I was like, I wasn't good at that. Yeah. But I felt that, but I know that it's getting stronger and
yeah.
there's more structure, which is really great. Which is really great. So I had another question. Whose responsibility is it if we do have somebody at the church that feels like, oh, I'm so burned out. Oh, nobody listens to me. Because I was reading on my phone right now because I just came from a training, and 80% of any agency organization's failure is due to, do you guys know the answer?
Burnout, self-care.
Communication. Lack of communication. Yeah.
100%.
Yes. So that was my question to you guys. Whose responsibility is it to know who's burning out, who's getting to that place of I'm overwhelmed? Whose responsibility is it to go and talk to that person and say, you know what, I've noticed something.
Well, I think it starts from the head, but then also he can't be all
Everywhere?
places everywhere at one time. So then, yeah, it goes down to the leaders, the core, and then the leaders from that. I think it's all of our leaders' responsibilities to be aware and intentional with who they're leading.
Okay.
So I think that, if you have leaders in ministry, right? If you're a leader of a children's church or a leader, of the women's ministry,
Yeah.
it's their responsibility to be intentional, right? And be aware of that. And not only, but the hard part is we're so good
At hiding?
at hiding. Yeah. No,
I don't believe that.
I think some people.
to be honest with you, there's been times that I was hiding and I put on a good face. And no, seriously, it would be hard
knew
to.
it.
Are you snitching on
It would
yourself?
have to be somebody that literally was being led by the Holy Ghost,
Right.
that would weed me out, because there was times that I was hurting and I was just going through stuff. And you know what? There's a lot of people like that come in and put a smile and are just, you would never think that person's going through a certain challenge in their life unless you were being led by the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit says that person. But I think sometimes too, we don't stop and step back and look, genuinely search and look at each person individually, like who you're with, and like kind of like when you go into a room and you kind of like fill the room out.
Yeah.
It's almost like sometimes being intentional in who you're with at the moment.
Right.
Of really feeling like, is this person, really doing good, or is there something, and asking the Holy Spirit, hey,
Give me
can you,
discernment.
give me discernment, because you might feel like a little like, something's just not right here, and asking for guidance, or discernment to be able to see that. Because I mean, there's been many times where I played the part and nobody caught that. It was honestly God. I had to, it was one of those things where in my quiet time where God helped me, or God sent me somebody.
And I'm just going to play devil's advocate out there. I don't know if we're supposed to use that word. I'm going to throw it out really quick. Was it that nobody was seeing it, or was it the pride that you didn't want others to see it? And the reason that I say that is because I was going through a lot of stuff. And I come in there and I think for the most part, I show a good front. I smile. I'm good. People come up to me and it's like, hey, Mary, how are things? I'm like, oh, things are good. Thank you. I don't want to, one, bother anyone. And number two is, and I know that it's a form of pride. And number two, it's like, let me just deal with it. Like, I'll figure it out. I already have my relationship with God. Me and God are going to figure this out. I don't need anybody else adding to it, or I don't want to feed it, if that makes sense. I don't want to feed it. So when others come up to me and say, Mary, are things good? I'm like, yeah, things are good. Yeah, I'm obviously lying through my teeth, because at that moment, I just came from crying my eyeballs out or whatever, but I just don't want to feed it. And I don't know if that's the right thing or the right message, but it works for me sometimes. But when I'm overwhelmed, I will reach out to somebody and like, hey, can you just talk to me? But so I'm wondering with that.
For me, I don't think it was more pride. I think it was more, I didn't know who to trust.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm very careful
Yeah.
with who I share what I go through.
Right.
But it got to a place, especially when we came to FRC, I threw everything on the table.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I ain't going to hold nothing. I even told them, I said, I'm throwing everything on the table, because I was at that point, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
and I wanted change, you know, and whatever that meant or whatever I had to go through, I wanted that really bad. So I was tired of putting on the face, the front, and everything else and telling people I'm okay and I'm not okay, right? A lot of the times, believe it or not, it was friends that I don't even talk to on a daily basis that would call me out of the blue and say, Ida, I had a dream. Are you okay? And I would actually, with that person, say, you know what? And the times they asked me, I was okay because I already got, you know, God had helped me with the breakthrough. But I told them, because they said, you know, I had a dream, but I prayed for you, you know? And I was like, well, you know what? Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yes, I was going through something a while back, but the Lord helped me through it. And thank you for being sensitive to, you know, to him in regards to me and praying for me, you know? But I think, you know, there could be sometimes pride that people, you know, hold up, that they just think they could do it on themselves and stuff like that. But for me, I don't think it was so much pride. I think it was more, I didn't know who to trust. And I just didn't want to tell anybody my stuff because, you know, I've learned from the past and a lot of people still love to gossip, you know, and they look for
but they're churchgoers.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, you know,
Okay.
they just,
Tell me more.
yeah.
No.
Well, I think what do you call it? That's on the kind of like the receiving end on the people that are going through it. Now let's go back to where on the other side, because I did want to share a little something, is that in a perfect world, the structure of leadership should be catching the people that are going through the stuff that they're going through. But there's one thing that God asked a man. He asked a man in Genesis, he asked Cain, where's your brother? And Cain turned around and said, am I my brother's keeper? So at the end of the day, we're to be looking out for those people because, and what it comes down to is some level of relationship. If we don't have any kind of relationship with the person, don't expect them to even tell you they're going through something.
And you're saying not just people in leadership. You're saying just
I'm
as
saying
the
anybody,
church, as a people.
Whether they're
Yes.
serving,
Okay.
whether they're just attending church.
Sit right next to
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Because too many times we could assume everyone's okay because we got an image to protect. We got you know, I'm in leadership. I got a title that I got to maintain. Okay, so too many times we hide behind that. But if all of us make it what do you call it? Seeking God and hearing from him, if we keep that on the forefront of our walk with God, he'll speak to us and tell us if somebody's going through something. And it always helps, like I just mentioned earlier, and I'm going to highlight it again, is relationship at some level. You know, because if you do, there's a better chance that that person might consider trusting you. But we need to have the testimony of being trustworthy.
Yes.
Because if you and I don't have a testimony and the character to be trustworthy, don't be surprised if people won't open up to you. Don't be surprised if people keep lying to you and say, I'm okay. It's sometimes they're saying, I can't trust you. But we don't want to hear that. You know, we think, well, you know, I got a title. You should be able to trust me. The title don't mean nothing. At the end of the day, it's God asking you and I, you know, where's your brother? Where's your sister? So I think that if we have that sensitivity in that area, like I said, whether they're in a ministry, not in a ministry, it could even be a visitor even, that God can just have you go talk to and, you know, just in conversation, you know, they just feel that, hey, this person has a love of God in them and there's something compelling me to share something that I wasn't ready to share. And then all of a sudden they get their breakthrough because all of a sudden they can trust somebody again. And they were so hurt from the last place they were at, you know, or a family member that hurt them and they just don't know how to process it. But now that open door took place, they're considering walking through it and seeing God actually heal them instead of them keep picking the wound and picking the scab so they keep on bleeding. You know, so I think that relationship is the key to everything. And in leadership, I would say that dealing with people has to be the something that you always have to be working at, because you're going to limit what level of leader you'll be if you choose to pick and choose who you want to help, who do you want to do life with, who do you want to spend your time with. And you were mentioning earlier about mentorship. One of the things that I've been seeing just in church in general is that most of the time when somebody, God places on their heart that they need to come up higher or go deeper with God, they'll turn around and come to someone and say, hey, would you mentor me? Would you, can I meet with you and stuff like that? And the first thing that I always do in that first conversation is, what does that look like to you? And what do you need me to bring to the table? Because if you don't clarify that up front, you're going to find yourself wasting too much time and energy because you have anticipated how to help them and they had a whole another picture.
So you didn't ask them what they need.
Yeah. And I think that that's a good place to start, because then you have a foundation to work from. And I've seen sometimes where somebody will say, hey, I want to be accountable to you and all this. I met with them one time and that was the last time we met. Yeah. And from time to time I'll say, hey, how you doing? And I'll kind of like try to get in there a little bit, but I just feel that the door's closed and I'm okay with it.
Right.
And yeah, they're not where they thought they were or where I thought they were. So I'm okay with that. No, nothing personal. And go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Did you want to say?
No, I wanted to just also say people can see sincerity.
Yeah.
And I heard one woman, she brought up, she was like, it says so much when you're walking by someone and they say, oh, how are you? And you're still walking. Good, how are you? As you're walking, they see that tells the person you don't really care.
No.
You're just saying hi, but with more syllables. And so this woman was like, you need to plant your feet, look them in the eye and say, how are you? And I will tell you, there is power in eye contact.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've seen people and the Lord will show you, looking in their eyes, you're not okay. And sometimes they need someone to look them in the eyes and say, what's wrong? And I don't know, I just feel like that's a really impactful way, is not just, be trustworthy, but also like be sincere about it. And I think too, that goes hand in hand with like, if you're busy a lot in serving, then you're not giving the Lord room to like, that's not the term. If you're busy serving, you're going to miss people that actually need the Lord. Right. And that's why I think it's so important as people who are serving in ministry in a healthy way to rest, not just to serve every day, or to serve every week. If you're serving every service, you're never not only sitting and engaging, but also like having time with people. I served in a ministry where I was behind a computer, and by the time I was done, the service was ended and everyone left. And I did that for months. And I liked the ministry, but I was like, I have no contact with people. And I'm not minimizing what I did because I know the Lord used it. But I'm like, Lord, you're calling me to help people and to be with people, commune with people, but I'm not even able to see them. So I think prioritizing people, like you're saying, is super important.
And I like that as a gauge, because I'm guilty of it, where I remember now I remember because I get convicted. Like out of the blue, I'll walk by somebody and I say, oh, hi. And then I keep going. And then after I pass them, I'm thinking, Ida, that was rude. You should have stopped. And now I know I remember you sharing that with me one time. But no, I'm going to be more intentional. I'm going to be more intentional with that.
No, because it hurts. I've had people do that to me.
So true. And that's something I definitely need to work on more. Yeah. But I was going to just share this real quick. I always just look at Jesus's life with the disciples. He was with them. He ate, drank. He served with them for 3 years. And he picked, the misfits of the bunch, 12. And one of them, turned him in, betrayed him. Yeah. So I think about the patience and no matter, even if he betrayed him, he still loved them. Yeah.
Washed his feet.
He washed his feet. Oh my gosh. That is so, you shouldn't have said that because you're making me cry. Anyways. But just that as something where you don't lose patience either, because sometimes we can get impatient with people, or the moment they betray you, or the moment they do something wrong. Like even Peter, when he cut off the ear from that
Yeah.
one soldier that, was going to arrest Jesus, but Jesus looked at him and put the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The sincerity, but Jesus still loved him.
Even
Didn't say, Peter, what did you do? No, he didn't. And for me, it's like we have to use Jesus lenses, look
Yeah.
through the eyes of Jesus and see his life and how he walked it out, and how more than anything, I think his life with the disciples is an example of what we need to be doing in church.
Right.
If that makes sense.
I wanted to add one thing that you had mentioned, Ruth, is that balancing ministry, meaning the duties of ministry and relationship with people. If you're, this is to whoever's listening that's serving in a ministry that feels like it's taking so much time, I would probably suggest to you to be involved in maybe 1 or 2 ministries. Don't do more than that.
Right.
Otherwise, you get so wrapped in the business of church that you don't understand. You could forget why you're doing it. So relationship is probably the highest priority at any level, to make sure that you're intentional, to make sure that you're building, establishing new relationships and building on the ones you have, because at the end of the day, you don't know that brother or sister sitting next to you if they're going to need you someday. And if they feel you've almost X'd them out because you're running around everywhere, you know what I mean? Because, I got to take care of this. I got to take care of this. And I've caught myself in the past where sometimes that happens, but I have to make sure that I remember not to fall into that trap again, because it's the enemy could use that trap. Even though you're in church, the enemy can do that so that you could turn around and be serving and doing all the different duties, but you're not even close to God's people anymore.
Oh, that's
It's almost like you have a quote unquote job. So you're clocking in and clocking out. And those are normally the people that tend to get twisted and leave the church for whatever reason, because they get so wrapped into the business that there's no heart no more.
Yeah, and I think. Oh no, I was gonna say real quick, and I just think that's why it's important to get plugged into like smaller groups.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a large church, because you can get lost, like you're saying,
Yeah.
and fall into a deep pit. But when you're surrounding yourself with at least a small core group of Christ-fearing people, God-fearing people, then you'll always be grounded, and you'll always have people looking out for you
Like a
spiritually.
home group.
Yeah, like a home group plug. No, but for real.
Yeah.
Like those small groups, they really do help. People sometimes will find themselves they'll find people trustworthy in those groups. So it's
And I
important.
think being okay with saying no. And something that came to me too is like when people get like that, that's where I think sometimes too it's hard for them to open up how they feel about a ministry. So then that's where even they start gossiping and talking bad about a ministry to the wrong people. And I think that what they need to be okay going to the right people and saying, hey, you know what? I'm feeling this way and I just need to step down, not look at a 6-month contract or 3-month contract, because a lot of churches do that. They tell you, look, you're going to serve this long. But I think that honestly, you need to be okay. And you as a leader need to be okay with saying, okay, you know what? I'd rather you spiritually be whole and healthy. And, if you need to step down, then step down. And if we don't have anybody to cover that ministry at the time and nobody wants to step up, hey, be okay with not having that ministry for a season, And I think being okay with being okay, saying no when you need to say no, if it means keeping yourself from walking away from church and hating God and hating the people and hating everything about it because, you just didn't know how to handle your ministry or the burnout at the time, if that makes sense.
And I don't know. I think as we're talking, ministry in church seems like that's where it's either going to kind of make you or break you on how you're maintaining your heart, navigating through that whole thing, because it could draw you closer to God. You could look more like Christ if you're doing it properly. Or the other way could happen. So I think that ministry in general, when people get hurt and go to another, I guarantee it was probably in ministry, and how they're handled, how they were spoken to. So I think if we turn around and realize that, you know, us as we're serving, and or if you're a leader, that's God's son, that's God's daughter. So be careful how you handle them, because you know there's no reason to there's no reason to go ghetto when you're in the kingdom. You know what I mean? As far as like throwing all this attitude and you know ignoring somebody, and you know, because honestly, that there's no room for that. Not in God's.
little things.
Yeah, we always say pick your battles, but you know, really, I've heard this before in a church that was a core value, and I actually try my best to stick to it. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's so vital, because once they feel that you care, they know that there's an open door if I need somebody. And the question is, will you and I choose to be that person? Will we step in the gap? Will we be that vessel that God can use for that season they might need us in? So we have to maintain our heart, make sure we have a healthy heart above everything else, because that's going to help us be that whole person. But, you know, if you're wounded and you don't even, as a leader, I don't care at any level, if your heart is hurt and you have a certain offenses that you still harbored, give it to God. I don't care what your title is. I don't care if you're in a mega church. Maintain a healthy heart, because then this journey will be a beautiful thing. It has ups and downs, but the journey of ministry and serving God, serving people, and being accessible to, you know, your life to so many people, there's a beautiful thing about it if you do it right.
And you know what, Tony, for the sake of time, I don't know, I guess we're okay, but I just want to, the leaders, the pastors, we're all human.
Yeah.
These people are human. So I want to talk to the people who want to join churches or have joined a church and they want to go into ministry. We're human. Like pastors are human, leaders are human. We have our own stuff that we go through. We're also relying on the individual to speak up. To say, you know what? I mean, this is the way I see it. If I was to go up to my pastor and say, you know, Pastor, I can't do this. I'm sorry. There's so much going on with my life right now. And he would to scold me, for example, I believe that God would put it inside of me. He's like, this isn't the place for you, Mary. It's time to go. I strongly believe that. And like, we're all grown-ups. We're all, you know, semi-professionals. So if someone is scolding you or telling you, no, you can't leave. No, you're not supposed to be doing this. I think that most people should have that insight to say, maybe this isn't for me. You know, maybe this is just not for me, or maybe it's not for me right now. Because if I can't even stand up and speak for myself, I feel like I still have that muzzle. What am I doing and who am I going to be able to help? Yeah. So I want to strongly encourage the listener out there who says, well, I felt overwhelmed and nobody was listening to me. Who are you talking to? Who are you? Because before we start pointing fingers and saying, well, those leaders and those pastors didn't support me. Maybe they truly didn't know. Maybe they were like me and you, Ida. Maybe they're like, I don't want nobody to know what's going on with me. And we show up every day, but we're hating life. And that's not fair to these individuals that are still human, just like the ones that are serving. We're still human. We fail to see some things, and sometimes because of what we're going in our own lives. But if you really feel that strongly that I'm being forced to be here, or I took a position and I shouldn't have done it, but you don't have, I'm not even going to say the confidence, but you don't have what it takes to go and talk to your leader, because it starts there. For the women's ministry, I wouldn't want the women to come up to me and say, you know, Mary, I don't want to do this. Hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't your strength. Let's find something else for you. Or maybe this isn't the time. You know, you get back to me, or however. That doesn't mean I stop talking to her. That doesn't mean like I completely shun her out of our lives or the church. No, I still keep a relationship with her. But I appreciate so much that she was able to come and tell me this, because sometimes we can't read it on people. We see them show up, so we think, wow, she really enjoys this. And and deep down inside, they're hating it. So I encourage those people that are serving or want to serve to go up and talk. And if I can't talk to my leader because she's weird or whatever, then talk to the pastors and let them, and start there. You know, sometimes we have to go over, there's chain of command everywhere. I just believe that. But it's like sometimes I had to jump a couple of steps and come to the pastor because I don't trust Mary, and I didn't trust the way she looked at me, or I don't trust whatever it is, right? So do that for you, because God doesn't want to force anybody to be in ministry, and God doesn't want you to feel weighed down, especially by ministry. So we want to encourage this healthiness within the church, but we can't do it if you're not even willing yourself. So I strongly want to put that out there for the listener. Like, be open. Also, be okay with yourself, and be okay with asking for help and talking to someone and saying no. Like you said, Ida, earlier, like say no, like this is too much for me, in a kind way.
Yeah.
And be okay with it.
Yeah.
Be okay
And
with
if
it.
you're on the receiving side of it, be okay with
Receiving it.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Exactly. Because I see that a lot of leaders can walk in religiousness and
You're supposed to
come
be
out-
doing it.
Well, I think it's because people put. I think one mistake that people made, which I don't know, I don't make that mistake, but a lot of people I've seen make this mistake where they'll put pastors and leaders in the same place that God is. And so if the leader or the pastor makes a mistake, obviously God sucks because he didn't, you know what I mean? So I think that is very important with people, whether you're not serving or if you're serving, if you're getting into it, make sure you're putting people in the right position mentally, because pastor is, as holy or as, God-fearing as he is, he's not God.
Right.
So, and he's human, which is like humans mess up, and not saying any pastors mess up, whatever, but humans mess up. And so we can't put that same expectation on them, because if they mess up, which it's inevitable because we're people, it's like, okay, it's okay, because they're growing with God, and they don't look at God the same way,
I think too, leading people and or being a person that's maybe helping disciple someone, mentoring them, however you want to call it, and if things kind of go south or it gets questionable, don't take it personal, because a lot of times we don't know the season they're in by which they're speaking. They could be going through something that they're venting something because of something that a season they're in. And sometimes we look at that and say, well, shoot, they're attacking me. Maybe they're not attacking you. Maybe they're just venting and they didn't know the best way to let it out. And then one other thing I want to add, like what you were saying, as far as, talking to your leaders, I think, like how you were saying, Ida, about saying no. I know a lot of times people would just say yes to say yes, because by them saying yes, they're feeling like they're pleasing God. At the end of the day, if you think about it, are you really helping the person that the leader and or the pastor just by saying yes all the time? One thing that I really appreciate with our pastor is that I went to him and had conversations with him and asked tough questions. And I think, earlier on when I was a younger disciple in another church and stuff, that was like something you don't do. You question your leader, even in a healthy way. No, you're not respecting him. And I think that as I've matured in my walk with God, I've realized that there's a real good way to be honest and ask tough questions in a respectful, loving way. And all that did, especially with me and my pastor now, is it made us even tighter. Because now I realize that I can talk to him and he's not blackballing me, or like how you had mentioned, sometimes there's something that you just don't want to do. I remember, like, in the past, there's a couple of times where he said, hey, Tony, I want to see if you could go ahead and preach. And I said yes initially, and my heart was yes. And then I realized, you know what? My home ain't in order. So I went to him and I said, Pastor, honestly, I can't right now. My home's not in order. And he turned around and he loved me through it. And I think that's an amazing thing. Instead of, well, let me see who's next in line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you're a pastor, you're a leader, make sure that you love people through these tough times, because that's where the hurts come from. You know, I thought that was amazing. And when I ask questions, like I said, some tough questions that maybe are on my heart and I just want better understanding, I went to my pastor and he'll explain it. And he's vulnerable. He's transparent and he explains it so that I walk away and feeling like my roots just got deeper instead of being questionable. So be willing to talk to your leaders and ask tough questions, but do it in a God honoring, respectful, loving way, because you're going to see that it makes you better as well as them, because that relationship just went up a notch.
So that was a really good conversation. I thank you guys for it. And remember, we're not showing up to impress man. We're showing up to be righteous before God. So in ministry and anything that you do, whether you're a leader, you're serving, be kind to yourself. Be willing to meet the other person where they're at. And for those of us serving, if we feel like this isn't the place for us, then be willing to talk about it. Okay, so we thank you so much and talk to you next time.